What's up YouTube, Capital G here, doing I guess kind of like a discussion slash tech idea video for a card and getting some input from you guys in the community, and that is on a huge revolution is over. Most of you guys are probably familiar with this card, or if you're not, you're probably familiar with Starlight Road. To be completely honest, the cards are almost identical. In fact, the activation conditions are very similar, but you know, I'll read the card. Huge revolution is over. It's a spell speed 3 counter trap. It says when a spell card, trap card, or an effect monster's effect is activated that destroys 2 or more monsters on the field, negate the activation and banish it. It's very akin to Starlight Road, which has pretty similar activation conditions, except it doesn't banish it, and it does give you a copy of Stardust Dragon. The Stardust isn't properly synchro summoned, so when you use Stardust's effect, you don't actually get to summon it back. But I've never really considered running Huge Revolution is over. I've seen sometimes the benefits in the past, but I've always thought that Starlight Road had a much higher ceiling because it gave you the free Stardust. In fact, and 2 of my regional top 8 decks, my Glad Beast and my TG Stun decks, I main deck Starlight Road. And I mean, when you were running a lot of back row heavy decks back then, you obviously needed protection from one of the biggest culprits that could trigger the card's activation, which was Heavy Storm. And it allowed you to kind of set all your back row, and if your opponent would dare Heavy Storm you, you could probably just win if you resolved Starlight Road because you got a monster, so it ended up being a +1. And then if Stardust took a card down with it, it's like you were just simplifying the game even faster. And I remember when I played TG Stun, there were 2 Torrentials in that format, and I used to just play aggressive as possible to get my opponent to Torrential me. But anyways, the reason I'm bringing up a huge revolution is over is because if I think, like, to me, there are a lot of cards that I guess are good for only certain periods in time. Like if you look at a card like X-Saber Palomaru, that card has been pretty much irrelevant for forever, and right now in this small period of time it's very viable because it works in Pepe, because we're in a pendulum format where getting a turn 1 Neteria Beast could like win you the duel, so it gives you access to Neteria Beast. It's searchable through King of the Pharaoh Imps, which everybody makes anyways. You know what I mean? We are running level 4 Earth monsters that you can pendulum summon, so it kind of makes sense that the card could be like it's more viable now than ever. And I kind of feel like that with the huge revolution is over. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all you guys should go out and buy this card or whatever, because the card really only works in like anti-meta-ish back row decks, like decks where you're trying to protect you know, a lot of like your Floodgate cards, like if you're running Lose One Turn, Vanities, maybe Goes in Match, Anti-Spell Fragrance. If you're running a lot of continuous spell and traps, or just generally if you need spells and traps like Time Space Trap Hole and Solemn Warning and Solemn Notice to not get run over by these pendulum decks, then I think this is a good card for you, because we all know that Twin Twister is a bitch of a card to deal with. To me, it almost seems like it has almost the same type of impact as a Heavy Storm when you get blasted by this card, especially if your opponent discards like a Damage Juggler or something like a Hat Tricker, and you're just like, wow, they didn't even really pay the cost, because discarding that card, like, it's just going to replace itself anyways. So getting blasted by this card can really hurt, especially if you lose your key Floodgate. A lot of times you just lose the duel to these pendulum decks. So first off, it is a great answer to this card. We all know that Regeki has been around for quite a while now, or like over a year, probably like a year and a half. People really haven't dropped this, well, some decks haven't dropped this card from the main deck. I say that Regeki still sees a lot of play, but here's the thing that really got me thinking about the huge revolution is over. And actually, I forgot a card up here. I'm going to add this card. The fact that this card does not, like, the fact that the cards that are being destroyed do not have to be on your side of the field is what makes this card viable right now. Let me look up one more card. I totally forgot. It's supposed to be in here. There we go. Let's add in Ruri Eyes. So yeah, this is really, what's it called? This is really important right now, because if you look at cards like Wavering Eyes or Pendulum Sorcerer, your opponent is trying to blow up their own cards. But usually if you can negate those somehow, which there's not a lot of ways to negate these. Well, there's not a lot of ways I can think of one card that can negate like both of them, unless you have like Cyber Infinity or something like that, or some type of blanket negation card. Yeah, something akin to that, or if you somehow have a Solemn Judgment or whatever. But anyways, usually if you can negate like a Wavering Eyes, your opponent is in a very bad position. Like, let's just say you go second. Your opponent, for them to effectively use Wavering Eyes, has to have something in both scales, which means they've already committed both cards to their scales, and then they commit the Wavering Eyes. So if you negate Wavering Eyes, half of their hand's already gone. You know what I mean? If they're going to do a Pendulum Summon, they have to Pendulum Summon with just the cards in their hand. They don't have any other resources unless they have, like, I don't know, unless they use something like Luster Pendulum or, Wisdom Eye Magician or something like that before. But in general, stopping this is really big. And the same thing goes for stopping Pendulum Sorcerer, because usually the cards on field that they want to blow up, sometimes they'll try and like pendulum them back the next turn. And more importantly, since the card does not get destroyed, it gets banished. It means that they can't pendulum this card back during their next turn, and they can't trigger it. The Monarchs are going to be coming out soon, and Karaz is actually, it's kind of like a one of in the deck. It's kind of used for like OTK pushes and whatnot. That's another good card that you can hit with it. I'm not saying that there are tons of cards that this is ideal for, but if you really look against like Pepe, these 3 cards, like, they're going to run 3 of this, they're probably going to run 2 or 3 of these, and they're probably going to run 2 or 3 of these. So there are a lot of cards that you can actually, stop, and they're pretty critical. Many times I'll see people put like 2, Wisdom Eye Magicians and their, 2 Wisdom Eye Magicians and their Pendulum Scales, and then, try and use Wavering Eyes, and you end up like stopping the Wavering Eyes, and they might not have any more plays, you know what I mean? So I feel like this card is actually pretty decent, and just, I think it's also worth noting that it is searchable from Aradne. So if you're running like a Pendulum deck yourself, maybe you splash in a couple of copies of this. You're probably not going to want to use it in that type of deck. But if you're running a Rodney, plus like maybe you side in some Wavering Eyes against your opponent, you can get it off of this. Now, obviously, if certain cards come back in the format if certain cards come back, maybe on the next ban list, cards that a lot of people went back into the game, such as Heavy Storm and Exciton Knight, obviously, things like Starlight Road and Huge Revolution is over. We'll see, they'll get a lot more consideration. But for right now, the card, I feel like, is worth looking at. But again, I think you have to be running a lot of back row, because when you do stop a Twin Twister, a Wavering Eyes, a Pendulum Sorcerer, a TT, or a Regeki, you'll be in pretty good shape. So you guys let me know with this, let me know if you guys think that this card is viable at all, and thank you for watching as always.